The crystal hall stretched higher than any building Deho had ever seen on Earth. Thousands of aliens filled the massive space, their voices mixing into a strange melody of clicks, hums, and whistles. Some floated in bubbles of different colored gas. Others walked on walls that bent gravity to their needs. A few were just balls of light that pulsed when they talked. Deho stood 3 steps behind Ambassador Hana, his black tactical suit plain and simple among all the colorful robes and shining armor around him. His right hand stayed close to his hip, where his plasma blade warden hung in its worn holster. The weapon looked ugly next to all the decorated swords and energy staffs the other bodyguards carried. He liked it that way. Hana moved through the crowd with smooth confidence, shaking hands and tentacles and claws. She smiled at everyone, speaking their greetings in a dozen different languages. Deho knew she had practiced for weeks to get ready for tonight. This party celebrated 3,000 years of galactic peace, and every important alien in the Concord was here. Humans had only been part of the Concord for 80 years. Many aliens still saw them as violent newcomers who didn't belong. Hana worked hard every day to change that view. Deho's job was to make sure she stayed alive while she did it. A trumpet sound filled the hall. Everyone turned to watch the main entrance. Prince Thelkanos of House Valor made his entrance with 12 guards behind him. The prince stood 7 feet tall with blue skin that sparkled under the lights. Glowing marks on his face and arms pulsed bright gold. He had 4 arms, and each one moved with careful grace as he waved to the crowd. The Valari were legends. 2,000 years ago, their warriors had been the strongest fighters in the galaxy. Now they were politicians and artists, but everyone still remembered their history. The prince's guards carried traditional energy swords that glowed with blue light. Each guard wore armor covered in metals and ribbons that probably meant something important. Deho watched them with professional interest. Pretty armor, fancy swords. Not one of them scanned the room for threats. Their weapons were for show, not use. He had seen this type before, on colony worlds where the rich hired guards to look impressive rather than be effective. The party continued. Deho stayed alert while aliens talked and laughed around him. Small flying robots carried trays of food and drinks suited for different species. One robot wobbled as it passed near Ambassador Hana. Deho saw the problem half a second before it happened, but too late to stop it. Purple wine splashed across Hana's white dress. The robot sparked and fell to the floor. The liquid smelled like flowers and chemicals mixed together. Hana stepped back quickly, but the damage was done. The purple stain spread across the front of her dress. Conversations nearby stopped as aliens turned to look. Prince Thelkanos laughed. It was a loud sound that carried across the hall. His glowing marks flashed brighter with his amusement. Primitive human technology fails again, the prince announced to the aliens around him. Perhaps they should leave engineering to species who understand it. His guards laughed with him. Other aliens looked uncomfortable but said nothing. In the Concord, insulting another species in public was considered very rude. But few wanted to challenge a Valari prince. Hana kept her face calm. Deho felt a small flash of pride at her control. She had dealt with worse than spilled wine and stupid comments. "Excuse me," Hana said quietly. "I need to clean this." She started to walk past the prince toward the exit. Prince Thelkanos extended one of his 4 arms directly in front of her, blocking her path. In Valari culture, Deho knew, this gesture meant treating someone like a servant. It said, "You wait until I allow you to pass." The insult was clear to everyone watching. The huge hall went completely silent. Even the floating energy beings stopped pulsing. This was more than rudeness. This was a direct challenge to human dignity in front of the entire Concord leadership. Deho moved. 3 smooth steps put him between Hana and the prince. He gently guided Hana to the side with his left hand, his cybernetic arm that was stronger than it looked. His right hand stayed near Warden. "Your Highness," Deho said. His voice was quiet and calm. "You'll want to move your arm." The prince's glowing marks changed from gold to red. Anger. He stared down at Deho with all 4 of his eyes widening. "How dare you?" Thelkanos' voice rose. "A mere bodyguard addresses me directly. Do you know who I am? I am Prince of House Valor. I have trained in combat since before your parents were born. I have studied with the greatest swordmasters in the—" Deho yawned, right in the middle of the prince's speech. A real genuine yawn that he didn't even try to hide. His jaw cracked slightly from the stretch, Somewhere in the crowd, someone made a choking sound. It might have been a laugh that got stopped very quickly. The prince stopped talking. His marks flashed through several colors rapidly, like he couldn't decide which emotion to feel. Finally, they settled on white, which Deho's cultural briefing had taught him meant pure rage and Valari body language. "I'm sure your sword is very pretty, Your Highness," Deho said in that same calm, almost bored tone. "Mine's killed 47 things exactly like you." The silence that followed was absolute. Every conversation in the massive hall had stopped. Every being from every species was staring at them now. In 3,000 years of conquered history, no one could remember the last time someone had spoken to royalty like this. Prince Thelkanos trembled. All four of his hands curled into fists. His breath came fast and harsh. Then, with a movement so quick it blurred, he drew his royal sword. The blade ignited with brilliant blue energy that crackled and hummed. He pointed it directly at Deho's throat. The weapon was beautiful, Deho had to admit. Intricate designs covered the hilt. The blade itself looked like frozen lightning. It probably cost more than everything Deho owned, including his ship. Deho didn't move, didn't even blink. The sword's tip hovered 2 inches from his neck, close enough that he could feel the heat from the energy blade. "I challenge you," the prince shouted. "By the ancient right of redress, I demand satisfaction for this insult. We duel at dawn tomorrow in the arena of Accord. Single combat to yield or incapacitation." Behind Deho, he heard Hana take a sharp breath. This was bad. The right of redress was an old law, from before the Concord had achieved peace. It was almost never used anymore, but it was still legal. If Deho refused the challenge, it would shame all of humanity. If he accepted and lost, it would be even worse. If he won, the political consequences could be terrible. Deho looked at the sword pointed at his throat. Then he looked up at the prince's face. The young alien's eyes were wide with excitement and righteous anger. He probably thought this would be glorious. A chance to prove Valari's superiority over the primitive humans. A story he could tell for the next 100 years of his life. Poor kid had no idea. "Fine," Deho said simply. "Dawn tomorrow. I'll be there." He turned his back on the prince and the still ignited sword. In most warrior cultures, turning your back on an armed opponent was the ultimate sign of disrespect. It said, "You're not worth guarding against." Deho gently took Hana's arm and guided her toward the exit. The crowd parted for them like water. Aliens of every species stepped aside, staring with wide eyes or multiple eyes or sensor clusters or whatever they used to see. No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. As they walked, Deho heard Juno's voice in his neural implant. His AI assistant sounded worried, which was unusual for her. "Deho, did you just accept a formal duel with a Valari prince in front of the entire galactic conquered leadership?" "Yep," he thought back at her. "And you yawned in his face first?" "I was tired. It's been a long day. Deho, I've been your tactical AI for 11 years. I know when you're deliberately provoking someone." "Why did you—" He disrespected Hana, Deho thought simply. In public. In front of everyone. Someone had to respond. They reached the exit. Behind them, the hall erupted in conversation. 1,000 different voices in 100 different languages, all talking about what they had just witnessed. Tomorrow's duel would be the most anticipated event in conquered history. As the doors closed behind them, Hana finally spoke. Her voice was tight with controlled anger. "We need to talk now." Deho nodded. He had expected this. Hana was brilliant at politics, which meant she understood exactly how complicated he had just made her job. But she also understood why he had done it. At least he hoped she did. They walked down the crystal corridor toward the human embassy quarters. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. Deho's right hand hung loose near Warden's hilt, a habit from 12 years of keeping people alive in dangerous places. Tomorrow at dawn, he would face a prince who had trained for over a century in the sword techniques of the galaxy's most legendary warrior race. The fight would be watched by billions across the conquered. The political future of humanity might depend on the outcome. Deho yawned again. He really was tired, and tomorrow was going to be a very long day. The human embassy quarters were small compared to the grand chambers other species occupied. 3 rooms carved from white stone, furnished with simple furniture from Earth. Hana paced back and forth across the main room while Deho sat on a plain chair, still wearing his black tactical suit. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Hana's voice was sharp but controlled. She never shouted, even when angry. The Valari have been pushing to remove humanity from the Security Council for 3 years. They say we're too violent, too unpredictable, and you just challenge their prince to single combat in front of every major power in the galaxy. Daiho pulled Warden from its holster and began cleaning the blade with a soft cloth. The weapon was dark metal, thick and heavy. Scorch marks covered the hilt where his hand gripped it. Unlike the prince's beautiful sword, Warden looked like what it was, a tool for killing. He disrespected you, Daiho said quietly. In public? Someone had to respond. I can handle insults, Daiho, that's my job. Your job is to keep me safe, not start wars with alien princes. I won't kill him. Daiho ran the cloth along Warden's edge. The blade gleamed dully in the soft light. I'll just embarrass him a little. Show him he's not as special as he thinks. Hana stopped pacing and looked at him directly. And what if you lose? I won't. His voice held no doubt, no arrogance. Just simple certainty. Hana sighed and sat down across from him. Some of the anger left her face, replaced by worry. Tell me why you're so confident. The prince has trained for over a century. The Valari were legendary warriors before humans even left Earth. Were, Daiho repeated, emphasizing the past tense. That's the key word. They were warriors. 2,000 years ago. Now they're artists who practice sword dancing for ceremonies. Beautiful movements that look impressive but have no purpose except to look good. He held up Warden. This blade has killed 47 swarm soldiers in real combat. Not practice. Not ceremony. Real fighting where if I made a mistake I died. The prince has never faced anything that actually wanted him dead. His training is all theory. Mine is all scars. In his neural implant, Juno spoke up. I've been researching the right of redress. It hasn't been used in actual combat for 847 years. The last real duel was between two merchants arguing over a trade route. Before that, you have to go back almost 2,000 years to find records of warriors fighting. Show Hana, Daiho said aloud. A holographic display appeared in the air between them. Juno projected data from her research. Charts, graphs, historical records. All of it pointed to the same conclusion. The conquered species had forgotten how to fight. 3,000 years of peace had turned warriors into performers and soldiers into ceremonial guards. But humans haven't forgotten, Juno continued. The Verdun campaign ended only 12 years ago. The conquered refused to help when the swarm invaded our colonies. They said it was an internal human matter, so we fought alone. Hana had read the reports, but Juno pulled up the details anyway. 3 human colony worlds attacked by a rogue AI collective. The swarm had built biomechanical soldiers, each one designed to kill efficiently. Humans had fought a desperate 3-year war with no outside help. They had won, barely, but at terrible cost. Daiho's combat record appeared in the display. Hana had seen parts of it before, but never the complete file. Special forces, deep penetration missions, the final assault on the swarm's core intelligence that ended the war. His unit had gone in with 23 soldiers. 4 came back. Daiho was one of them, minus his left arm. 47 confirmed kills, Juno stated flatly. Each one a swarm biomechanical warrior. Each one in close combat. Daiho has more real fighting experience than probably every current conquered warrior combined. Hana studied the data in silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. I knew about Verdun. I read the basic reports when I hired you. But I never knew the details. 47 kills in close combat. That's not something to brag about. No, Daiho agreed quietly. It's not. He touched his cybernetic left arm unconsciously. Every one of those kills meant I was in a situation where killing was the only way to survive. Everyone meant my training worked and theirs didn't. Everyone meant I went home and someone else didn't. He looked up at Hana. The prince thinks tomorrow will be glorious. A chance to prove himself. He's excited about it. His marks were glowing gold when he challenged me. That's how I know I'll win. Because he doesn't understand what fighting actually is. It's not glorious. It's just ugly and necessary. Across the city in the Valari Palace, Prince Thelkanos was also preparing. But his preparation looked very different. Servants helped him into ceremonial armor that sparkled with embedded crystals. Each piece had been worn by his ancestors in formal duels centuries ago. The armor was beautiful, a work of art, but it was heavy and restricted his movement. His swordmaster, an elderly Valari named Kelmora, watched with growing concern. Kelmora was old enough to remember stories from his grandfather, who had lived in the last generation of Valari who actually fought wars. Those stories never described combat as glorious or exciting. They described it as frightening and sad. "My prince," Kelmora said carefully, "perhaps we should reconsider this duel. The humans fought a real war recently. This bodyguard may have experienced that nonsense." Delcanos interrupted. His marks flashed bright gold with confidence. "I have trained since I was a child. I know every sword form, every technique developed by the greatest Valari masters. This human is just a common soldier, probably some brute who knows nothing but crude violence." The prince lifted his sword and performed a complex series of movements. All four of his arms moved in perfect coordination, the blade creating patterns of light in the air. It was breathtakingly beautiful. Every movement flowed into the next with practiced grace, see? Perfection. Tomorrow I will show the entire Concord that Valari superiority is not just legend, it is fact. Delcanos smiled, his marks pulsing with excitement. Kelmora said nothing more. But as he watched his prince practice beautiful, useless sword dances, he felt a deep worry. He had seen the human bodyguard's eyes during the confrontation. They were not the eyes of a brute. They were empty eyes. The eyes of someone who had killed not for glory but for survival. Those eyes haunted Kelmora. Back in the human quarters, Hana had moved on from anger to planning. "All right, you're confident you'll win, but we need to think about what comes after. If you humiliate the prince, the Valari will be furious. They might push even harder to remove us from the Security Council, or they might respect us," Deho suggested. "The conquered species have lived in peace so long they've forgotten what real strength looks like. Maybe it's time someone reminded them." "That's a dangerous gamble," Hana said. "Everything we do is a gamble. We're the newest species in a 3,000-year-old alliance. We're always going to be walking a tightrope." Deho finished cleaning Warden and slid it back into its holster. "At least this way we're walking it on our own terms." Juno interrupted their conversation. "I'm detecting unusual activity in the Concord communication networks. Someone is coordinating something. Multiple encrypted messages between several ambassadors all in the last hour." "Can you trace them?" Deho asked. "Working on it. The encryption is military grade, which is interesting. Most ambassadors don't use that level of security for normal communications." Hana and Deho exchanged a look. Something else was happening. Something beyond just a duel between a bodyguard and a prince. But they would have to deal with that later. "Get some rest," Hana finally said. "Tomorrow is going to be difficult enough without you being tired." Deho nodded and stood. As he walked to his small sleeping chamber, he passed a mirror. He stopped and looked at his reflection. 34 years old, but his eyes looked older. The cybernetic arm gleamed dully next to his flesh one. Scars marked his face and neck, some from swarm weapons, some from other fights before and after. He remembered the Verdun campaign. The fear, the exhaustion, watching friends die, the desperate final assault on the swarm core, the explosion that took his arm and almost took his life. Coming home to Earth and finding he didn't quite fit anymore. The nightmares that still woke him some nights. 47 kills. He had told the prince that number to make a point. But it wasn't really about the number. It was about what those kills meant. Each one represented a moment where he had been 1 second away from death. Each one meant his training, his instincts, his luck had been just slightly better than his opponents. Each one was a reminder that combat was not glorious. It was just survival. Tomorrow he would face the prince, and he would show him what real fighting looked like. Not because he wanted to, not because he enjoyed it, but because someone had to teach the Concord that peace was not the same as weakness, and that humanity had earned its place through blood and pain. Deho lay down on his bed, still fully dressed except for his boots. Old habit from the war, always ready to move quickly. Juno's presence hummed quietly in his neural implant, monitoring his vitals, scanning for threats even while he rested. "Are you worried?" Juno asked quietly in his mind. "About the fight?" "No." He closed his eyes. "About what comes after?" "Yes, you could always lose on purpose. Let the prince win. It might be politically easier." "No." His voice with Concord needs to know that who. Dawn came with soft purple light filtering through the alien sky. The arena of Accord stood at the center of the diplomatic district, carved from a single massive crystal that caught and reflected light in strange patterns. The ancient structure had witnessed 3,000 years of history, but very few actual fights. Thousands of aliens filled the arena seats. Every species in the Concord seemed to have sent representatives. Some perched on special platforms. Others floated in their atmosphere bubbles. A few were just consciousness living in crystal containers. All of them had come to watch something they had only read about in history books. A real duel. Deho walked to the center of the arena through one entrance gate. He wore the same simple black tactical suit from yesterday. Warden hung at his hip in its worn holster. He had eaten a light breakfast and done some stretching. Nothing special, just another day at work. The crowd watched him in silence. No cheers, no booze, just intense curiosity. Hana sat in the human delegation box, her face carefully neutral. She had wanted to say something encouraging before the fight, but Daiho had just shrugged. "I've done this before," he had said simply. From the opposite gate, Prince Thelkanos made his entrance. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. He wore ceremonial armor that sparkled with crystals and precious metals. All four of his arms moved in coordinated waves, acknowledging the crowd. His marks glowed brilliant gold. Pure confidence. The prince began a traditional pre-combat dance. His sword ignited with blue energy as he moved through a series of forms. Each movement was perfect, flowing into the next with practiced grace. He spun and leaped, his forearms creating mesmerizing patterns with the blade. Light reflected off his armor and sword, creating a dazzling display. It was beautiful. Even Deho had to admit that. The prince had clearly spent decades mastering these forms. Every angle was precise. Every spin perfectly balanced. It looked like art in motion. Deho just stood and watched, hands at his sides. When the prince finished his display, Deho made no move to perform his own. He simply drew Warden. The heavy blade activated with a low hum, much quieter than the prince's crackling energy sword. No flourishes, no ceremony. Just a weapon in hand. A floating referee appeared above them. The being was pure energy, its voice resonating through the arena without sound. By the ancient rite of redress, these warriors meet in single combat. The duel continues until one yields, is incapacitated, or leaves the circle. The arena's protective field will prevent lethal strikes. Honor to the worthy. Begin. The energy field hummed to life, creating an invisible dome over the fighting circle. If either blade struck with lethal force, the field would absorb most of the impact. Enough to hurt, not enough to kill. Safety measures for a civilized age. Prince Thelkanos attacked immediately. He was fast, incredibly fast. All four arms worked together. The blade attacking from multiple angles in rapid succession. High, low, left, right. Each strike flowed into the next. The technique was called the Valari Storm, and it was considered one of the most difficult sword forms in conquered history. The crowd roared with approval. This was the legendary Valari combat prowess they had heard about in stories. Deho didn't try to match the prince's speed. He didn't block every strike. Instead, he moved just enough. The blade that should have hit his shoulder missed by 2 inches. The thrust aimed at his stomach found only air. The overhead strike whooshed past his ear as he tilted his head slightly. He was reading the prince's body, not his sword. Every attack telegraphed itself in the shift of weight, the angle of shoulders, the direction of eyes. Deho had learned this in the war against the swarm. You didn't watch the weapon, you watched the person holding it. 30 seconds passed. The prince had thrown 40 strikes. None had landed. His marks began flickering from gold to yellow. Confusion. This wasn't supposed to happen. The human should have been overwhelmed by now. Thelkanos pressed harder, adding feints and misdirection to his attacks. He incorporated energy blasts from his sword, small bursts of blue light that shot toward Deho. He used all 4 arms independently now, creating attacks that came from impossible angles. Still, nothing landed. Deho moved through the attacks like water flowing around rocks. Minimal effort. Maximum efficiency. In his neural implant, Juno fed him tactical data, but mostly he relied on instinct honed through hundreds of life-or-death encounters. Then Deho made his first strike. Nothing fancy, just a simple forward thrust aimed at the prince's center. Thelkanos blocked easily with 2 of his arms, but the force behind the blow staggered him backward 3 full steps. The crowd gasped. Human muscles were denser than most Concord species. Pound for pound, humans were among the strongest beings in the galaxy. The prince had probably never been hit that hard in practice. His marks flashed orange. Surprise. You're very good at dancing, Deho said quietly. his voice barely carried to the front rows. "But you've never fought anything that wanted you dead, have you?" The prince's marks flashed red, anger. He unleashed everything he had. The ceremonial restraint vanished. Now he fought with pure emotion, attacking with all four arms in a furious assault. Energy blasts filled the air. His blade moved so fast it created afterimages. He incorporated spinning kicks using his legs as additional weapons. It was spectacular. The crowd was on its feet. Light and color filled the arena as the prince demonstrated techniques that hadn't been seen in public for centuries. This was Valari combat at its finest, the legendary skill that had made them heroes of old. Deho ended it in 3 moves. First, he feinted high toward the prince's head. Thelkanos brought 2 arms up to block exactly as his training dictated. Second, Deho's cybernetic left hand shot out and grabbed 2 of the prince's wrists. The mechanical grip was far stronger than any biological hand. Third, before the prince could react, Deho swept his legs with a simple kick. The prince crashed to the ground. Warden's point came to rest against his throat, the blade humming quietly. The entire sequence had taken 1.4 seconds. Complete silence fell over the arena. No one moved. No one breathed. The floating referee waited for the prince's response. "Yield." Deho's voice was quiet. Not triumphant, just tired. He had no joy in this victory. It was just something that needed to be done. Prince Thelkanos lay on his back, all 4 arms spread out. His marks cycled rapidly through colors red, purple, orange, blue. Confusion, shame, anger, fear. For the first time in his long life, he had been completely outmatched. Not because his opponent was stronger or faster, but because his opponent knew something he didn't. The prince looked up at Deho's face. He expected to see triumph or arrogance or satisfaction. Instead, he saw nothing. Empty eyes. The eyes of someone who had done this too many times before. Someone for whom winning a fight brought no pleasure, only the grim satisfaction of survival. In that moment, Thelkanos understood. His century of training had been preparation for performances. Deho's training had been preparation for death. Every movement the human made was designed to end the fight as quickly and efficiently as possible. No wasted energy, no dramatic flourishes. Just cold, practiced competence. "I yield," the prince whispered. His marks dimmed to a dull gray. Defeat. Deho immediately deactivated Warden and returned it to its holster. Then he did something that shocked the crowd even more than his victory. He extended his hand to help the prince stand up. The gesture was simple, human, universal. It said, "The fight is over. Now we are just 2 people again." Thelkanos stared at the offered hand for a long moment. In Valari culture, showing respect to a defeated enemy was expected, but receiving respect after losing was almost unknown. Pride usually prevented it. But the prince reached up with 2 of his hands and accepted the help. Deho pulled him to his feet. The arena erupted in sound. Some aliens cheered, others sat in stunned silence. Many were already talking urgently to each other, analyzing what they had just witnessed. The implications would be discussed for years. The floating referee announced the result. Victory to the human Deho by submission of his opponent. The right of redress is satisfied. Honor to both warriors. As Deho turned to walk away, the prince spoke. "Wait." His voice was quiet, meant only for Deho to hear. "You said your weapon has killed 47 things like me. What did you mean?" Deho stopped. He looked back at the prince, considering how to answer. Finally, he said, "Not like you personally. Like you culturally. 47 enemies who were trained in their skills, who thought they would win. Each one learned the same lesson you just did. Training for ceremony is not the same as training for survival. And you've survived them all." The prince's marks flickered uncertainly. "Not because I'm special. Because I was lucky, and because I learned from people who knew real combat. The difference between you and me isn't talent or genetics. It's that Wang people died. When you made mistakes, you just started over." Deho's voice was matter-of-fact, without judgment. The prince stood silent, absorbing this. His century of training, his pride in his skill, his confidence in Valari superiority, all of it had been shattered in less than 2 minutes. But instead of anger, he felt something else. Curiosity. And the first stirrings of real understanding. In the human delegation box, Hana released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Deho had won as News of the duel spread across the galactic Concord at the speed of light communication. Within hours, every world in the Alliance knew that a human bodyguard had defeated a Valari prince in less than 2 minutes. The recordings were watched billions of times. Analysts studied every movement. Politicians debated what it meant for the balance of power. Ambassador Hana's schedule filled immediately. Requests for meetings poured in from dozens of species. Some wanted to discuss military cooperation. Others wanted to hire human security consultants. A few wanted to establish trade deals for human weapons and training. Deho stood behind her during the meetings, silent as always. But now the other species' ambassadors looked at him differently. Before, he had been just another bodyguard, barely worth noticing. Now they watched him carefully, analyzing his posture, his movements, trying to understand what made him dangerous. He found it exhausting, the constant attention, the whispers when he walked past. Other guards now looked at him with a mixture of respect and wariness. Some young warriors even asked if they could train with him. He politely declined. What he knew couldn't be taught in a training room. It could only be learned through necessity, but not everyone was pleased by humanity's sudden rise in status. In a private meeting room deep within the diplomatic district, 5 ambassadors gathered in secret. They came from different species, different cultures, but they shared one concern. Humans were becoming too influential too quickly. Ambassador Sethis led the meeting. He was Sistari, a species that looked like serpents with arms. His scales were dark green and his eyes glowed with orange light. The Sistari had been part of the Concord for over 1,000 years and held significant economic power. We must act, Sethis hissed. The humans have been in the Concord for only 80 years. Already they reshape our politics. If this continues in another century, they will dominate us. We cannot allow this. A Valari ambassador nodded. My prince's defeat has shamed our entire species. The humans must be shown their place. They are too violent, too unpredictable. They do not respect our traditions. 3 other ambassadors voiced their agreement. Each had different reasons for opposing humanity, but all feared the same thing: change. The Concord had been stable for 3,000 years. Humanity's presence disrupted that stability. Their recent wars, their military competence, their refusal to simply accept the existing power structure, all of it threatened the comfortable order. What do you propose? One ambassador asked. She was a crystalline being that communicated through light pulses. Her translated words appeared in the air as text. Sethis's smile showed too many teeth. We create an incident. Something that proves humans are too dangerous to trust. A terrorist attack on a neutral station. The evidence will point clearly to human involvement. The Conquered will have no choice but to expel them and impose sanctions. Can we guarantee the evidence will be convincing? The Valari ambassador asked. I have contacts. Mercenaries who can acquire human weapons. Experts who can create the proper signature. It will be expensive but effective. Sethis produced a data crystal. I've already begun preparations. Station Harmony 7 is perfect. It is neutral territory, far from major worlds. The casualties will be regrettable but necessary. The conspirators discussed details for another hour. Times methods, plausible deniability. They used military-grade encryption for their communications, believing themselves safe from detection. After all, most species in the Concord had little experience with intelligence work. Peace had made them complacent about security. What they didn't know was that humans had not become complacent. The Verdun campaign had taught humanity that threats could come from anywhere, including within supposed alliances. Juno had been monitoring Concord communications since the duel, looking for exactly this kind of coordinated activity. 6 hours after the secret meeting, an explosion rocked Station Harmony 7. The blast destroyed 3 sections of the station. 47 beings died, dozens more were injured. It was the worst terrorist attack in conquered space in over 1,000 years. The emergency alert reached Hana and Deho while they were reviewing diplomatic correspondence. Hana's face went pale as she read the initial reports. Then she saw the preliminary investigation results. No, she whispered. This can't be right. Deho moved to read over her shoulder. The evidence was damning. Explosive residue matched compounds used in human military demolitions. The detonation signature was consistent with Earth-style blast patterns. Surveillance footage showed a figure in human tactical gear near the blast site 30 minutes before the explosion. We didn't do this, Hana said firmly. We would never— I know, Deho interrupted. Which means someone wants everyone to think we did. Juno, those encrypted communications you were tracking, when did they start? Juno's voice came through his implant and the room's speakers simultaneously. 6 hours before the explosion. I've been analyzing the traffic patterns. 5 separate ambassadors, all using identical military-grade encryption, all coordinating their schedules to avoid their own security watching them. Can you break the encryption? Hana asked. Already done. They used military encryption, which means they assumed peace made them safe from military cyber warfare. They were wrong. Humans have recent experience with this. 12 years of fighting the swarm taught us everything about breaking secure communications. Data began appearing on the room's display. Here are the full transcripts of their planning session. Hana read through the messages, her expression hardening with each line. The conspiracy was laid out clearly. Plans to acquire human weapons, instructions for creating false evidence, calculations about acceptable casualties, and at the center of it all, Ambassador Sethis. This is enough to clear us, she said. But we need to present it carefully. If we just dump this data publicly, they'll claim it's fabricated. We need to go through proper channels. The Concord Security Council meets tomorrow to discuss the attack, Deho noted. That's when they'll call for humanity's expulsion. We need to stop that from happening, Hana thought quickly, her diplomatic mind working through possibilities. We'll need allies. Someone respected enough that when they present this evidence it can't be dismissed. What about the prince? Deho suggested. Thelkanos. One of the conspirators is from his own species. If he stands with us against the conspiracy, it carries weight. Hana looked skeptical. You just defeated him in public. Why would he help us? Because I saw something in his eyes after the fight. He learned something. Maybe he learned enough to see the truth when we show it to him. Deho's voice was thoughtful. Besides, one of the conspirators is trying to use his defeat to push their agenda. That's using him. He might not appreciate that. It was risky, but they had few options. Hana sent a message requesting a private meeting with Prince Thelkanos. The response came within minutes. The prince would meet them in 1 hour at a neutral location. They met in a small garden within the diplomatic district. The space was designed for private conversations, with sound-dampening fields and privacy screens. Prince Thelkanos arrived alone without his usual entourage of guards. His marks glowed a steady pale blue. Cautious curiosity, Ambassador, Deho. The prince nodded to each of them. His voice was different from before. Less arrogant, more measured. I confess I'm curious why you wish to speak with me. Hana got straight to the point. She showed him the evidence, the encrypted communications, the planning session, the names of the conspirators, including the Valari ambassador who had used the prince's defeat as justification for the plot. The prince's marks flickered through several colors as he read. Surprise, anger, disgust. When he finished, his marks had settled on deep purple, determination mixed with anger. They used my defeat, my shame, to justify murder. His voice was tight with controlled fury. Ambassador Kelvor claimed to speak for Valari honor, but this is the opposite of honor. This is cowardice. Will you help us present this evidence to the council? Hana asked. Coming from you, it cannot be dismissed as human fabrication. Thelkanos was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked directly at Deho. After our duel, you showed me respect when you could have it between appearance and reality. Now I have a chance to apply that lesson. He stood straight, all forearms at his sides in a formal posture. I will stand with you before the council, not because I like humans or approve of your methods, but because truth matters more than pride, and because those who committed this crime must face justice. Deho offered his hand again as he had in the arena. The prince took it without hesitation. This time the gesture was not about ending a fight. It was about starting an alliance. That night, as Deho prepared for the council meeting, Juno spoke quietly in his implant. You took a risk reaching out to the prince. He could have refused. Could have reported us to the conspirators. He could have, Deho agreed. But I saw something in him after the duel. Recognition, understanding. He realized his whole worldview was built on assumptions. People like that, when they start questioning their assumptions, they keep going. They look for truth instead of comfort. You raid people well, Juno observed. Had to. In the war, understanding your enemy kept you alive. Understanding your allies kept them alive too. He touched Warden's hilt on Con. The Concord Security Council chamber was built to impress. The vast circular room could hold representatives from all 47 member species. Each delegation had its own section with customized atmosphere, gravity, and seating. At the center stood a raised platform where speakers addressed the full assembly. Above everything, High Chancellor Vormeth presided from a floating throne. Every seat was filled. This was the most important council meeting in decades. Billions watched across the galaxy through live feeds. The attack on Harmony 7 demanded a response, and the evidence pointed clearly at humanity. Deho stood behind Ambassador Hana in the human delegation section. He wore his usual black tactical suit, Warden at his hip. Around him he could feel the hostile stares. Guards from other species watched him with suspicion. Some had their hands on their weapons. If the council voted to expel humanity, things might get violent quickly. High Chancellor Vormeth called the session to order. His ancient mandibles clicked as he spoke, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. We gather in grief and anger. 47 innocent beings died at Harmony 7. This is the worst terrorist attack in conquered space in over 1,000 years. We will hear the evidence and render judgment. Ambassador Sethis slithered to the central platform. His scales gleamed under the lights. His orange eyes swept the assembly with confidence. Honored council members, the evidence is clear. The explosive compounds were human. The detonation pattern was human. Surveillance shows a human near the blast site. We cannot ignore this. Humanity has proven too violent, too dangerous for our peaceful alliance. He displayed the evidence on holographic screens throughout the chamber. Chemical analysis, detonation signatures, the surveillance footage showing a figure in tactical gear. It all looked damning. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. I move that humanity be expelled from the Concord immediately, Sethis continued. Furthermore, economic sanctions should be imposed until they can prove they have eliminated their terrorist elements. We cannot risk another attack. 4 other ambassadors spoke in support. The Valari ambassador was particularly passionate, citing the attack as proof that humans respected neither life nor peace. The conspiracy was working perfectly. Within minutes, it seemed certain the council would vote to expel humanity. Then Prince Thelkano stood. His sudden movement caught everyone's attention. He walked to the central platform with steady confidence. His marks glowed steady purple. Determination. I wish to speak, the prince announced. The chamber fell silent. A Valari prince speaking at a council session was unusual. A Valari prince speaking in defense of humans was unthinkable. Vormeth's mandibles clicked. The council recognizes Prince Thelkanos of House Velar. The prince's voice was clear and strong, very different from the arrogant young royal who had challenged Daiho just days earlier. 3 days ago, I challenged a human to combat. I believed I would demonstrate Valari superiority. Instead, I learned humility. I learned the difference between ceremonial art and real skill. I learned that assumptions can be dangerous. He gestured to the evidence displays. Ambassador Sethis has shown you evidence that appears to prove human guilt. It is convincing. Too convincing. I have reviewed this evidence with the same clarity the human Deho taught me to see combat. And I have found inconsistencies. New holographic displays appeared, replacing Sethis's presentations. The prince highlighted specific details. The explosive compound contains trace elements found only in Sesthari chemical synthesis. The tactical gear in the surveillance footage is configured for 3-fingered hands, not 5. Humans have 5 fingers, and most importantly, the timing. He pulled up communication logs. 6 hours before the explosion, 5 ambassadors began using identical military-grade encryption to coordinate their activities. The explosion occurred precisely when their planning indicated it should. These same ambassadors are now demanding humanity's expulsion. The chamber erupted in chaos. Ambassadors shouted. Guards moved nervously. Sethis' scales changed color from green to angry red. These are lies, fabricated by the humans to save themselves. Ambassador Hana stood and walked calmly to the platform. Daiho followed 3 steps behind, as always. She waited for the noise to die down before speaking. Prince Thelkanos speaks the truth. We have the complete communications between the conspirators. Every planning session, every coordination, every instruction for acquiring weapons and creating false evidence, Sethis hissed loudly. Impossible. Those communications were encrypted with the highest level security. Deho stepped forward for the first time. His voice was quiet but carried clearly through the chamber. You used military-grade encryption. Military encryption is designed to stop other militaries. We humans fought a real war recently. We learned everything about breaking secure communications. Your mistake was assuming peace made you safe. It just made you sloppy. Juno projected the full data across every screen in the chamber. Messages between Sethis and his co-conspirators. Plans to hire mercenaries. Instructions for creating fake evidence. Financial transactions. Everything was there, time-stamped and verified. The 5 conspirators tried to leave. Guards moved to block them. The evidence was too complete, too detailed to dismiss. Within minutes, security personnel were escorting them from the chamber. Sethis fought against his guards, still hissing denials, but no one was listening anymore. Vormeth's mandibles clicked rapidly. Amusement, perhaps. It seems we have learned several important lessons today. About assumptions. About competence. About the dangers of underestimating those we consider primitive. The ancient chancellor looked directly at the human delegation. 3 days ago, a human bodyguard defeated a Valari prince in combat. Some saw this as proof of human violence. Others saw it as proof of human capability. Today we see it was proof of something else. Humans remember what we have forgotten. They remember that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the management of it. They remember that strength without wisdom is violence, but wisdom without strength is merely philosophy. He paused, letting his words sink in. The conquered has enjoyed 3,000 years of peace. Perhaps we have been too comfortable. We created laws about combat, but forgot why those laws existed. We built security systems, but forgot who might threaten us. The humans have reminded us. Not through aggression, but through competence. The chamber was completely silent now. Every being hung on Vormeth's words. The ancient leader continued. I move that humanity remain in the conquered with full privileges. Furthermore, I propose that we learn from them, not just their military skills, but their vigilance, their understanding that peace must be protected, not simply assumed. The vote was not unanimous, but it was overwhelming. Humanity would stay. More than that, their status was actually strengthened. Several species immediately requested meetings about security cooperation. Others wanted to discuss training programs. The humans had proven themselves valuable in a way the conspirators had not anticipated. After the session, Thelkanos found Daiho in a quiet corridor. The prince's marks glowed soft blue. Peaceful satisfaction. We did well today, Daiho nodded. You did well. You didn't have to stand with us. It would have been easier to stay silent. You taught me something in our duel. Not just about fighting, but about seeing clearly. When I applied that same clarity to the conspiracy, the truth became obvious. The prince looked thoughtful. Ambassador Kelvor used my defeat to justify terrorism. He claimed to speak for Valari honor, but there is no honor in murder. In that moment, I understood what you meant when you said your sword had killed 47 things like me. What did I mean? Daiho asked, curious. Beings who were confident in assumptions that turned out to be wrong. Who believed reputation mattered more than reality. Who thought style was more important than substance. I was one of those beings. You showed me I was wrong. And because you showed me with respect rather than contempt, I was able to learn. Much longer to question their assumptions. If they ever do at all. Thelkanos took the hand with all 4 of his own. A gesture of deep respect in Valari culture. Perhaps that is the difference between a defeat and a lesson. A defeat just hurts. A lesson changes you. You could have simply defeated me. Instead, you taught me. That is a greater victory than any combat. Ambassador Hana joined them, looking tired but satisfied. The political fallout from this will be interesting. We've made allies today, but also enemies. The conspirators have supporters who will resent us. There will always be those who resist change, Thelkanos said. But today we proved that truth matters more than comfort. That will resonate with many species. You have my support going forward, Ambassador, and I believe my father, the king, will agree with my assessment once I explain what happened. They talked for a while longer, discussing next steps and political strategies. But eventually the prince departed to deal with the fallout within his own species. A Valari ambassador had been part of the conspiracy. That would create problems for the royal family. Hana and Daiho walked back to the human embassy quarters. The alien city glowed around them with bioluminescent lights and energy fields. Beings of 100 different species moved through the streets. going about their lives under the protection of 3,000 years of